After the inauguration of Philippine Commonwealth on November 15, 1935, President Manuel L. Quezon approved Commonwealth Act No. 1, otherwise known as the National Defense Act of 1935. This act provides the backbone of our national defense policy in creating an independent Philippine military. General Douglas MacArthur, who was then the head of the U.S. military mission, was designated by President Manuel L. Quezon as advisor on the development of the Philippines' defense plans. The Philippine Army's primary duty upon the operationalization of the National Defense Act of 1935, it was contemplated that a reserve force would be conscripted to be composed of 20-year-old Filipino males. In April 1936, to provide junior officers who were to train the aspiring officer candidates, the Philippine Army established the Reserve Officers Service School at the different training centers at Camp Henry T. Allen, Baguio City. The first class, Class 1, 1936, began in June 19, 1936, composed of 156 officer candidates. The University of the Philippines ROTC graduates formed the nucleus of the class, like Alfredo Santos and Rigoberto Atienza. Captain Bonnie Fellers, Quezon's liaison officer, concurrently served as the school's commandant. There are 4 assemblymen who joined the class: Assemblyman Manuel Rojas, Felipe Buencamino Jr., Pedro Vera, and Jose Ozamas. Fellers was one of the only 4 American officers who were detailed to the Philippine Army, along with officers from the Philippine Scout and Philippine Constabulary who served as instructors. These officer candidates also received specialized training at U.S. Army stations, such as Fort Stotsenburg, Corregidor, and Fort McKinley. A few months later, at Camp Murphy, the Ross Class 01 graduates received their reserve commissions. Subsequently, they were delegated to various military areas to act as the instructors for students of Class 1937. During this period, President Manuel L. Quezon had expressed his opposing view on the reported hazing cases perpetrated by upperclassmen to their juniors. He argued that disciplinary methods must teach subordination of the individual, but must not permit servility. In 1937, by virtue of Section 34, Article 4 of the National Defense Act of 1937, the School for Reserve Commission was established as greater emphasis was placed on other sources of reserve officers following the de-emphasis of the reserve officers school system, which shifted its focus from producing reserve line officers to training school teachers with stronger foundations in conducting pre-military training. 3 training venues of the SRC were opened following the start of regular training. 2 infantry schools at Camp Orr, Tarlac, and at Camp Keithley, Lanao, and 1 artillery school at Camp Del Pilar, Dau, Pampanga. The SRC's continued operations alongside ROTS until the outbreak of the Second World War in 1941. When war broke out in the Pacific, the graduates of the ROTS and SRC was tested under fire as they took part in the Philippine Defense Campaign. Alumni like then Major Alfredo Santos, Major Rigoberto Atienza, and Major Ismael Lapus etched their names in military history during the gallant defense of Bataan and continued to fight the foreign invaders as guerrillas during the resistance movement and later the Philippine Liberation Campaign. After the war, the SRC was reactivated and assigned to the Philippine Army School Center, Philippine Army Training Command in Fort McKinley, pursuant to AFPGHQ General Orders No. 412 S-54. From April 1951 to May 1953, the Philippine Air Force at Nichols Air Base conducted 3 officer candidate courses, whose graduates were commissioned in the AFP Reserve Force. Later that year, the officers' training was taken over by the Ground Combat School at Fort McKinley, Fort Bonifacio, wherein 6 classes graduated. The SRC was reactivated in 1954 and continued the officer candidate training of classes numbers 7 to 25 from September 1954 to April 1959. On April 6, 1959, an Army training directive tasking the school to conduct non-commissioned officer courses was issued. Exactly 2 months later, in June 1959, The unit officially vacated its old site at Fort McKinley and transferred to Fort Magsaysay, where Officer Preparatory and Soldier School was established, evolving its focus to encapsulate both preparatory officer development and specialized soldier NCO training, in which 39 classes of officer preparatory course was conducted, until its entire scope of the preparatory course were moved and absorbed by the Officer Candidate School, OCS, in 1999. In 1975, the School for Reserve Commission was reactivated in Bangad, Cabanatuan City, to handle the training of qualified enlisted personnel for commission. Interestingly, Philippine Air Force enlisted personnel composed the SRC Class 1, 1975. A year later, the SRC was renamed the AFP Officer Candidate School to accommodate the requirements of commissioned officers for the whole armed forces of the Philippines. The students of the pioneering AFP-OCS classes were enlisted personnel from all branches of service: the Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Philippine Constabulary. The AFP-OCS completed the training of 7 OCC classes before its deactivation in 1979. The alumni of this school are popularly known as AFP-OCS Bangad Group. Following an 8-year break, the AFP-OCS reactivated in its new home in Camp Kapanpan, Barangay Sampaloc, Tanay, Rizal. It was eventually placed under the AFP Training Command. The first officer candidate course class was opened in 1987, making it the pioneer OCC class among 17 classes that graduated in this location. The OCs in this era came not only from the enlisted personnel, but professionals and baccalaureate degree holders from the civilian sector. Some Filipino OCs were sent to continue their training in Australia, India, New Zealand, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. In 1993, the AFP-OCS admitted its first foreign students from the Royal Brunei Armed Forces and joined the Officer Candidate Course Balik Katan, Class 12-94. OCC Class 2 made history by producing the first female graduates of the AFP Officer Candidate School. This achievement was made possible through Republic Act No. 7192, which promoted the integration of women as full and equal partners of men and opened admission to military schools. Among the trailblazers was Jocelyn Regis, a graduate of AFP-OCS Class 4-1990, who later became the first female tactical officer of the Philippine Military Academy, paving the way for future generations of women in uniform. Following the September 1996 peace agreement, the AFP-OCS conducted 2 classes composed of former members of the Moro National Liberation Front. In 1997, Higher Headquarters dissolved the AFP-OCS in accordance with Letter of Instruction No. 2497, decentralizing the OCC training to the Army, Air Force, and Navy. This paved the way for the emergence of 3 OCS under the administration of the Major Services. In 1999, the pre-entry training for officers was conducted by the Candidate Officer and Soldiers School in the same venue as the defunct AFP-OCS, accommodating the students of OCC Class 20-2000 and the Officer Preparatory Course Class 40-99. Thereafter, CAUS was renamed as the Philippine Army Officer Candidate School after the deactivation of the Officer Preparatory and Soldier School in Fort Magsaysay, Nueva Ecija. Since then, the PAOCS has accommodated the training of the Officer Preparatory Course, which is composed of students who are eligible and qualified inactive commissioned officers of the Army Reserve Force. Having received several training instructions as Reserve Officer Training Corps cadets, the OPC training was shortened to 6 months. The first class to be integrated in the OCS was the OPC Class 40-99, which trained together with the OCC Class 20-2000. Since the transition in 1999, the Officer Preparatory Course has been officially executed as a specialized course within the Officer Candidate School, eventually moving from Camp Kapanpan to Camp O'Donnell, Capas, Tarlac as its permanent home. The latest OPC class to be conducted was the OPC Class 72-2020. In 2005, the Philippine Army Officer Candidate School was transferred to Camp O'Donnell, Barangay Santa Lucia Capas, Tarlac. The school facilities were co-located with the Training and Doctrine Command of the Philippine Army. The school also catered the training and development of the officers who comprise the Technical Administrative Service branch of the AFP, after the deactivation of the Technical Service Officer School under the AFP Training Command in 1997. The program was then called Technical Service Probationary Officer Course, or the TSPOC, which provided 6-month training for the professionals who wishes to join the AFP Technical and Administrative Service. Its training was conducted in Camp General Mateo Capinpin, Tanay Rizal, together with the students of the AFPOCS. The first Tazspot class that was under the auspices of the PAOCS was the Tazspot Kazil Layan, Class 09-2010, which consists of 40 probationary second lieutenants from the various technical and administrative branches. The Tazspot is the primary source of personnel for the Armed Forces, Medical Corps, Dental Service, Chaplain Service, Judge Advocate General Service, Nurse Corps, Medical Administrative Service, Corps of Professors, and the Veterinary Corps. Likewise, with the stop of OPC program in 2020, the OCC-ROTC program was created in order to accommodate the qualified college graduates who had completed the Probationary Officer Training Course, or MS-43, in 2021. The inaugural class consisted of 24 young officers who successfully broke ground on the new curriculum, with specialized 8-month training, which provided an accelerated yet rigorous bridge for top-tier reserve component products to earn commissions into the regular force. To unite the alumni under the one OCS banner, the graduates of all foreign service schools affiliated to the SRC AFP OCS and the graduates of Officer Preparatory Course from Officer Preparatory and Soldier School were officially integrated into the Officer Candidate School Alumni Association Incorporated. In 2023, the Officer Candidate School introduced positive reforms in the training for future Army officers. The intent of the OCS leadership was to totally eradicate the training malpractices that do not contribute to the development of leaders of character and excellence. To achieve this, the school's overall policies are reformed through the introduction of the Platoon Leaders Development System, a training approach that emphasizes positive leadership, coaching/mentoring, and character development.